Some hungers make no sound at all. They come on small bare feet before sunup, with pride buttoned tight and shame held in both hands. Out in the New Mexico territory, where the wind could scrape a man down to his bone, folks learned that kindness was not always a sermon or a silver coin. Sometimes it was a biscuit left where a child could reach it. Sometimes it was a man following two little shadows through the dust and finding the truth that half a town had chosen not to see. The first morning Clay Cassidy saw the boy, the child was running across the hard yard behind the Paradise Creek livery with a baby balanced against his narrow hip and a dented blue tin cup clattering from one hand. Dawn had barely lifted over Las Cruces, and the cookhouse stove still breathed low orange through its iron mouth. Clay stood by the water barrel, sleeves rolled, rinsing coffee grounds from a blackened pot, when the boy slipped between the feed shed and the woodpile like a fox that had learned every dog in town. The baby made a thin sound, not quite a cry, more like a hinge needing oil. The boy froze. Clay froze too. For a long second, all that moved was the steam from the dishpan and the dust curling around the child's ankles. The boy could not have been more than 6. His trousers were cut from a man's old pants and cinched with twine. One knee was torn clean through. His hair stuck up in sleep-matted brown tufts, and the baby in his arm wore a bonnet made from flour sacking, tied under a chin too pale for any healthy infant. Clay looked at the cup. The boy looked at the biscuits cooling under a cloth on the sill. "Morning," Clay said softly. The boy's little chest rose and fell like he had run all the way from the edge of the earth. "I ain't stealing," he whispered. Clay set the coffee pot down slow, careful not to clank it. "Didn't say you were." The baby turned her mouth toward the smell of fruit and rooted against the boy's shirt. The boy swallowed. "She ain't had milk." Clay heard something in that sentence that made the morning larger and quieter. He lifted the cloth from the biscuits. 4 sat there, cracked golden at the tops, still warm enough to shine with butter. He took 2, wrapped them in a clean napkin, and stepped back from the sill. "Cups for milk?" he asked. The boy gave one sharp nod. Clay crossed to the shelf where Mrs. Calder, the livery owner's widowed sister, kept a crock of milk for coffee. He filled the blue tin cup nearly to the rim. The boy watched every inch of the pour, his eyes so hungry they seemed older than his face. "What's your name?" The child's fingers tightened around the baby, Tommy, and her, Ruth. Clay held out the cup. "Easy now. Don't spill." Tommy took it with both hands, though that left the baby sliding crooked in his arm. Clay moved without thinking, one hand coming under Ruth's back to steady her. The boy flinched so hard the milk trembled. Clay pulled his hand away. "I want take her." Tommy stared at him, deciding whether grown men could tell the truth. Then he tucked the cup against his chest and backed toward the shed. Clay nodded at the biscuits. "Those 2." Tommy grabbed the napkin and ran. Before he reached the alley, Ruth began to fuss in earnest, hungry and offended by waiting. Tommy turned his shoulder around her like a shield and disappeared behind stacked barrels. Clay stood there with a dish towel in his hand, feeling the place where the child had flinched. If this story finds a soft place in you, tell us where you are listening from tonight. And if you believe small kindness can change a life, like, share, and subscribe so more folks can find these frontier stories. Now come back with me to that hungry morning. The next day they came again. Clay heard them before he saw them, the scrape of Tommy's shoes on the yard boards and the wet little cough of the baby. He had been awake since 4, currying a gray mare for a freighter headed west, but he had kept one eye on the cookhouse door. He had told himself he would not wait. Waiting made a man foolish. Still, he had set 3 biscuits beneath the cloth. This time Tommy did not run so fast. He stepped out from behind the woodpile, cup ready, eyes fixed on Clay's hands. Clay poured milk. Tommy held Ruth closer. "You got any for Ma?" Clay looked at him. The boy bit the inside of his cheek, as if he had said too much. "For your Ma?" Tommy nodded once. "What's her name?" The boy's chin came up. "Marta Pritchard." Pritchard. Clay knew the name, though not well. A woman by that name had come through town near 2 weeks ago with a trunk, a sewing basket, and 2 children. Folks said she had rented the old wash house beyond the arroyo, the one with a roof that sagged like a tired mule. Folks said other things too, because town talk was cheaper than flour and spread faster than fever. Clay had not paid heed. A man who listened to every loose tongue in Las Cruces would never hear the wind. "Was she need?" Clay asked. Tommy shifted Ruth to his other hip. The baby's little hand grabbed at his collar and held on. "She says she don't need nothing." That sounded like grown-up trouble. Clay took a small cloth sack from the pantry and put in biscuits, 2 boiled eggs, and a heel of yesterday's cornbread. Then he wrapped a slice of ham in paper. He held it out. Tommy did not take it. Clay waited. The boy stared at the sack as if it might bite him. "She said not to beg." "This ain't begging," Clay said. "This is breakfast that was going to waste. You lying." A little, for the first time, Tommy's eyes flickered with something almost like trust. He took the sack. "Tell your ma Mrs. Calder sent it," Clay said. Tommy frowned. "Did she?" "No." "Tell her Clay Cassidy sent it then. She don't like men sending things." Clay let out a slow breath. "Then tell her a stubborn fool at the livery overcooked breakfast." Tommy considered that, then tucked the sack under his arm and ran. On the 3rd morning, Clay found the blue tin cup already sitting on the bottom step. "No children." He picked it up. The cup was clean. Someone had scrubbed it with sand until the blue enamel wore white at the rim. Tucked inside was a folded scrap of brown paper. He opened it. The hand was small and tight, every letter carefully made. "Mr. Cassidy, my son, has no business troubling you. I will repay what was taken as soon as I can. Please do not give him more. Martha Pritchard, no thank you." No explanation. Just pride standing guard over hunger. Clay read it twice, then a 3rd time. Mrs. Calder came in behind him carrying kindling, her gray hair wrapped in a faded red scarf. "That from the Pritchard woman." Clay folded the note. "You know her? Only that she's taken in washing from the hotel and mending from anyone mean enough to pay half price." Mrs. Calder bent to the stove and pushed kindling through the door. "Came from up north, I hear. Widow, might be, or worse than widow." In some folks' eyes, Mrs. Calder struck a match. A woman alone always gets assigned a sin, whether she brought one or not. Clay tucked the note into his shirt pocket. Mrs. Calder looked over her shoulder. "Don, go making that your business, unless you mean to see it through." Clay said nothing. That was the trouble with Mrs. Calder. She could put a branding iron right where a man's conscience already hurt. Clay Cassidy had once been known for seeing things through. There had been a time when men trusted him with a herd, a child, a debt, a road through bad country. Then his younger sister, Eliza, had died in childbirth while he was driving cattle near Santa Fe, and her baby had followed before the church bell finished tolling. Clay had come home to 2 small graves and 1 letter asking why he had not been there. No one wrote that question but himself. Since then, he had kept to practical things: horses, harness, wheels, fence work, coffee before sunup, money folded flat, and debts paid on time. He slept in the livery loft above the smell of hay and leather, and if loneliness came up the ladder at night, he turned his face to the wall and let it sit beside him. Children were not part of his life anymore. But the blue cup was in his hand, and a baby had coughed like paper tearing. On the 4th morning, Clay waited behind the half-open cookhouse door. Tommy came just after first light, carrying Ruth in a sling made from a shawl too thin for the cold. He paused at the step when he saw the cup empty. His face fell before he could hide it. Clay stepped out. Tommy jerked backward. "I got your mass note," Clay said. "She mad?" "Might be. She don't get mad loud." Tommy looked down, just quiet. Clay crouched, though his knees cracked. "I won't give you food if it gets you in trouble." Tommy's mouth trembled. and that was worse than crying. Ruth cries when Ma's working. What work? Washing, sewing, scrubbing. She coughs too, but she says it's just dust. Clay glanced toward the east, where the town thinned into brush, gray mesquite, and dry gullies. Where are you staying? Tommy shook his head. Fair enough. Ruth woke and blinked at Clay with big solemn eyes. Her lips moved. She was not old enough to understand shame. Hunger was simple to her. Warmth was simple. Milk was simple. Clay stood and went inside. He came back with milk, bread soaked soft in gravy, and a jar of stewed apples Mrs. Calder had put up last fall. He set them on the step instead of handing them over. For Ruth, he said. Babies like soft. Tommy stared at the jar. She had apple once. When? Christmas. He paused. I think. Clay kept his voice easy. Can you carry all that? Tommy looked at the food, the cup, the baby, and his own two small hands. I can. He could not. Halfway across the yard the napkin slipped, the bread slid into the dust, and Tommy made a sound like something had broken inside him. He dropped to his knees, baby still tied to him, and tried to pick the bread clean with shaking fingers. Clay reached him in 2 strides. Leave it. Tommy bent over the bread. No, there's more. No, there ain't. The words came out fierce, ugly with terror. Clay crouched beside him and did not touch him. Tommy, look at me. The boy's face was red with humiliation. There is more. Tommy's eyes searched his, desperate to believe and afraid to. Clay took the dirty bread and tossed it toward the chickens. Then he went back inside, cut fresh pieces, wrapped them better, and put everything in a small market basket with a handle. He tucked the milk cup into one corner, wedged tight with cloth. Tommy took the basket. This time he whispered, "Thank you." Clay watched him go, and with every step the boy took, Clay's decision settled deeper. The 5th morning, he followed them. He did not do it like a lawman. He did not sneak with suspicion in his pockets. He waited until Tommy had the basket and was past the blacksmith shed. Then he took up his hat and walked far enough behind that the child would not hear him. The town was waking slow. A rooster crowed behind the boarding house. Somewhere a pump handle squealed. The air smelled of dust, coffee, manure, and the faint iron scent of the Rio Grande beyond the cottonwoods. Tommy moved along back ways, never once taking the main street. He knew where loose dogs slept. He knew which fences had gaps. He knew how to become nothing when a wagon passed. Clay followed him past the closed schoolhouse, past the old adobe chapel with its cracked bell, past Carter's mercantile where yesterday's flour dust still marked the steps. When 2 women came out carrying baskets, Tommy ducked behind a rain barrel until their skirts vanished around the corner. The baby did not cry. That troubled Clay most. Ruth had learned too early that crying spent strength. At the edge of town, Tommy crossed a dry wash, climbed the far bank, and headed toward the abandoned wash house. Clay stopped. The place stood beside a line of scrub cottonwoods, a low adobe building with one window boarded, one window broken, and a roof patched with canvas and flattened tin. A stovepipe leaned from the side wall. Smoke came from it, thin as a pencil mark. Laundry hung between mesquite branches, stiff in the cold morning. Men's shirts, hotel sheets, a child's little dress, gray underthings rinsed until they had no shape left. Tommy pushed the door open with his shoulder. Clay heard a woman cough, not polite cough, not dust. The sound bent her double. He stood in the wash and removed his hat. Through the broken window he saw her. Martha Pritchard was kneeling by a tin tub, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hands red from lye water. Her hair, dark with a chestnut shine where the light touched it, had escaped its pins and clung damply to her temples. She was thinner than she ought to be, with cheekbones too sharp, and a dress mended in 6 places. Yet there was a steadiness in her spine that made the poor room seem less defeated. Tommy set the basket on the table. Martha turned. Clay could not hear her first words. but he saw the way Tommy dropped his gaze and Ruth reached both arms toward her. Mara lifted the baby with a tenderness so quick it nearly undid Clay. Then she saw the basket. Her face changed, not greed, not relief, fear. She crossed the room, opened the basket, and found the food. Her hand went to her mouth. Then she looked toward the door as though help itself were a danger that had followed her home. Clay stepped back from the window. A twig snapped beneath his boot. Inside, silence fell. Then the door opened. Mara Nachar stood in it, holding Ruth against her. Tommy half hidden behind her skirt. Up close, her eyes were gray. Not soft gray like rain, but flint gray. The kind that had struck sparks in hard places. You followed my child? Clay held his hat in both hands. I did. Her chin lifted. Why? Because he's 6 years old carrying a baby across town for breakfast. The truth struck the doorway and stayed there between them. Marta's face went pale, but she did not step back. We owe you for what he took. He didn't take it. He brought it. I gave it. I told you not to. Clay nodded once. Yes, ma'am. That seemed to trouble her more than argument would have. Ruth turned her face into Marta's shoulder and gave a weak cough. Marta's hand moved over the baby's back, rubbing slow circles. Clay looked at the washtub, the sagging roof, the cold hearth, the stack of wet sheets, and the heel of bread on the table cut into 4 careful pieces. He looked at Mara's bare hands, cracked at the knuckles and raw across the palms. I know a woman who needs washing done, he said. Mrs. Calder at the livery. Fair pay, hot stove, food while you work. I have work. You have too much work and not enough pay. Her eyes sharpened. You think I don't know that? I think you know it better than me. Wynn moved the laundry behind him. A sheet snapped like a gunshot, and Tommy flinched. Clay saw it. Marta saw him see it. Something guarded closed in her face. We are managing, Mr. Cassidy. Clay looked at Tommy. The boy had both hands around the empty blue cup. He was licking a crumb from his tomb with the desperate shame of a child, trying not to be hungry where adults could notice. No, Clay said quietly. You're enduring. Mara's eyes shone sudden and dangerous. That is not yours to name. No, Mom. Then leave us be. Clay put his hat back on. I can do that. He walked away because she had asked him to, but every step felt wrong. That afternoon, he carried a sack of oats to Mrs. Calder's pantry and told her what he had seen. She listened without interrupting, which was one of her ways of judging a man. When he finished, she wiped flour from her hands and said, Bring the wagon around. Clay frowned. For what? For laundry. I've been meaning to quit sending ours to that thief, Carter's niece. She scorches collars. She won't take charity. Good, I'm not offering any. Mrs. Calder took a ledger from a drawer and opened it. I pay 25 cents a dozen pieces. Meals included if work is done on the premises. Same as anyone. That's more than Carter pays. Carter is a wart on the foot of commerce. Clay almost smiled. Mrs. Calder tore a clean page from an old catalog and wrote in her square, bossy hand. Then she folded the paper. You hand her that. Don't loom in the doorway like a guilty undertaker. And don't decide what she needs before she tells you. Clay took the note. Yes, ma'am. When he returned to the wash house, Marta was outside wringing a sheet. Her arms shook with effort, but she set her jaw and twisted until water fell dark into the dirt. Clay stopped at the edge of the yard. Mrs. Calder sent a work offer. Marta did not look at him. Set it on the stump. He did. She wrung another sheet. Ruth lay in a wooden crate lined with blankets near the door, awake but still. Tommy sat beside her, moving a cracked red button along the dirt like a wagon wheel. Every few seconds he glanced at Clay as if expecting him to vanish or strike. Clay nodded at the boy. That button got a name. Tommy guarded it in his fist. It and yours? No, it's my horse. Fast horse? Tommy thought about lying, then shook his head. Hungry horse. Clay's throat tightened. Martha's hands stilled on the sheet. She turned at last, and the anger in her face had tired into something worse. "Mr. Cassidy, what do you want?" Clay could have said many things. He wanted to know why she was here alone. He wanted to know who had left those children hungry. He wanted to know why she looked over her shoulder when wagon wheels sounded on the road. Instead, he said, "I want to carry the wet laundry to the wagon before your hands split open." She stared at him. "I can pay," she said. "I didn't ask. I don't like owing. Neither do I." "Then why are you here?" Clay looked at the sagging clothesline, then at Tommy's hungry horse button, then at Martha's bleeding knuckles. "Because my arms are working and yours are wore out?" For a moment, she seemed to have no answer for something that plain. Then she stepped aside. He carried the sheets. That was how it began. Not with roses, not with a kiss, not with a moonlit promise. It began with wet hotel sheets heavy as grief, a wagon bed, a woman too proud to ask, and a man careful enough not to call his help mercy. Martha came to the livery washroom the next morning, with Ruth tied to her front and Tommy walking beside her, one hand holding her skirt. She wore the same brown dress, brushed clean, and her hair was pinned tight enough to say she had dressed for battle. Mrs. Calder met her at the door. "Mrs. Pritchard?" "Yes, I'm Abigail Calder. I pay on Saturday, but meals are daily. Coffee there. Stove there. Wash tubs out back. No man in the washroom unless you call for lifting." Martha glanced at Clay, who stood by the far stall pretending to fix a bridle that needed no fixing. Mrs. Calder followed her glance. "He knows how to stay out from underfoot." Clay lowered his eyes to the leather. Martha said, "I'll do the work." "I expect so." Mrs. Calder pointed to a table near the stove. "Children can sit there if they don't put fingers in the wringer." Tommy looked at the table. There was a plate on it, 3 biscuits, a small cup of milk, a peeled boiled egg sliced in half with salt. He did not move. Martha saw it too. Her face tightened. Mrs. Calder said briskly, "Payment for sweeping." "Boy can sweep, can't he?" Tommy straightened. "I can." "Good." Brooms by the door. The child went for it with solemn importance. Only after he had made 3 fierce swipes across the floor did he sit and take a biscuit. He ate like a creature afraid the food might be snatched back, not messy, not greedy, fast, with his body curved around the plate. Ruth watched from Martha's lap and began to fuss. Martha broke off a soft inside piece of biscuit, wet it with milk, and touched it to the baby's mouth. Ruth opened like a nestling. Clay looked away. All morning Martha worked. She did not work like a woman defeated. She worked like a woman who understood order could be its own kind of prayer. She sorted collars from linens, whites from colored calico, hotel sheets from ranch shirts. She tested water heat with the back of her wrist. She scrubbed cuffs where men had ground in dust and sweat. She set Tommy to shaking crumbs from napkins and folding dry towels, badly but earnestly. When the stove smoked, she knew to open the lower draft with the toe of her boot. When a shirt button hung by a thread, she set it aside and mended it before returning it to the basket. When Ruth cried, Martha lifted her, sang 2 lines under her breath, and kept stirring bluing water with her free hand. Clay watched from his workbench more than he meant to. By noon, Mrs. Calder set stew on the table, beef finely stretched with potatoes, onion, and barley, coffee for the adults, milk for the children. Martha remained standing. Mrs. Calder sat first, then pointed with her spoon. Food goes cold while pride makes speeches. Martha's mouth moved as though she might argue. Then Ruth coughed, and Tommy stared at the stew with both hands clenched on his knees. Martha sat. Clay ate at the far end of the table, quiet. Tommy did not look up until his bowl was empty. Then he did something Clay would remember long after. The boy took 1 potato piece he had saved beneath his spoon and placed it on Martha's plate when he thought no one saw. Martha saw. So did Clay. Martha stared at that potato as if it were a diamond. "You eat it, Tommy." He shook his head. For you. I had enough. No, you didn't. Her eyes lowered. She ate the potato. Slowly, like accepting a blessing she did not think she deserved. That evening after work, Mrs. Calder paid Martha for the day in coins, though Saturday had not come. Martha protested. Mrs. Calder said she had changed her payroll customs at age 60 and did not require permission. Martha counted the money twice, then folded it into a small cloth purse worn thin at the corners. Clay glimpsed something else inside when she opened it. A folded letter sealed and resealed, the paper soft from handling. On the outside was a name written in dark ink, Pritchard Landclaim. Martha noticed his gaze and snapped the purse shut. Clay said nothing, but the first clue had shown itself. Days took shape. Martha and the children came in the morning. Tommy swept with a seriousness that made Mrs. Calder inspect corners just to praise him. Ruth began to cry louder, which Mrs. Calder declared a good sign, because only improving babies had energy for complaint. Martha's cough eased a little when she ate twice a day, though she still turned away and pressed a cloth to her mouth when it came. Clay repaired a loose rung on the children's chair without mentioning it. He hung a hook by the stove for Martha's shawl. He started leaving a bucket of clean water near the washtubs before she arrived, claiming the pump needed emptying anyway. When Ruth fell asleep, he set a feed sack over the window crack so the light would not fall across her face. Martha noticed everything. She thanked him for none of it at first. That was not coldness. Clay came to understand it was fear. Thanks could become debt in the hands of the wrong person. A favor could become a rope. Martha had known someone who twisted kindness until it had knots. One evening, rain came hard out of the west, sudden and slanting. The wash house beyond the arroyo would leak. Clay knew it. Martha knew he knew it. She tied Ruth's bonnet under her chin and wrapped Tommy in her shawl. Clay stood by the open livery door, watching water strike the yard in silver nails. Road's going to wash. We've walked it before. With the baby, Martha pulled the shawl tighter around Tommy. Good night, Mr. Cassidy. Thunder rolled beyond the Oregon mountains. Ruth woke and whimpered. Clay reached behind him and took down his old canvas coat from a peg. Take this. No, it's not for you. Her eyes flashed. He held it out to Tommy. It's for him to keep the baby dry. Tommy looked up at Martha. Her jaw worked. Rain blew in beneath the eaves, dotting Clay's sleeves. He did not move closer. At last Martha took the coat. I will return it dry. Return it when you're done needing it. I don't keep what isn't mine. Clay's voice softened. Neither do I. Something passed across her face at that, quick as lightning and gone. He nearly asked what he had said. He did not. The next morning the coat came back folded, brushed, and smelling faintly of wood smoke. In one pocket, Clay found a button sewn back on, neat as store work. After that, Martha began to say, the water was helpful, or the hook keeps Ruth's blanket clean. Never thank you exactly, but close enough to warm a corner of the room. Tommy changed too, slowly. He stopped hiding food in his pockets, though once Clay found half a biscuit tucked inside his boot for later. The boy began asking questions about horses. Not many, one at a time, as if questions cost money. Does that mare bite? Only men who deserve it. Do horses get hungry sad? Sometimes. What fixes it? Feed first, kindness after. Tommy considered that. Same as people. Clay looked at him. Same as people. Ruth learned Clay's voice. Whenever he came into the washroom carrying wood, her round eyes followed him. One afternoon she reached for his hat brim and laughed. A rusty little sound from a baby who had not had much practice. The room stopped. Martha stood with both hands in rinse water, staring at her daughter. Tommy grinned. She laughed. I heard, Martha whispered. Clay, caught with Ruth's fingers on his hat, did not know what to do. He went still, letting the baby hold him there. Martha's face softened in spite of herself, and for one breath he saw the woman she might have been before fear and hunger had narrowed every day. Then the door opened. Elias Carter came in wearing a black wool coat shiny at the elbows, and a smile that never reached the rest of his face. He owned the mercantile, half the debts in town, and the habit of speaking to poor women as if poverty had made them deaf. "Well now," he said. "Mrs. Pritchard, I was told you had found better employment." Martha lifted her hands from the tub and dried them on her apron. "Mr. Carter," Clay set Ruth gently back in her crate and straightened. Carter's eyes passed over him. "Cassidy," Clay nodded once. Carter turned back to Martha. "You left 3 bundles unfinished." They were finished. They were damp. They were clean, he smiled. "Clean don't sell if mildew sets." "I had to discount payment." Martha's face changed, only by degrees, but Clay saw the blow land. "You already paid half the agreed amount, and generously, considering." Carter looked around the washroom. "You'll find Mrs. Calder has charity in her accounts." "I do not." Mrs. Calder came from the pantry, with a flour scoop in hand. "Mr. Carter, if you track mud on my floor, I'll charge you for cleaning it." Carter ignored her. He pulled a folded paper from his coat. "There is also the matter of your rent on the wash house." Martha went still. Clay's eyes moved to her. Carter unfolded the paper with ceremony. 2 months past due, including arrears transferred from Mr. Pritchard's account. Martha's voice was low. "My husband's debts are not mine unless proven. Territory courts might disagree. My husband is dead, and debts are living things." Carter tapped the paper. "They grow." Tommy had moved behind the chair. Ruth began to whimper, picking up the fear in the room. Clay stepped forward. "This is a workplace. Bring your business after hours." Carter looked him up and down. "Business follows debt, Cassidy, not." Into Mrs. Calder's washroom. Mrs. Calder raised the flour scoop jar. "He's right. Out." Carter's smile thinned. "Careful, Mrs. Pritchard. A woman with no legal roof ought not turn away opportunities." Martha lifted her chin. "Was there one offered?" His eyes moved over her in a way that made Clay's hand close. "I have rooms behind the mercantile," Carter said. "Work there. Cook, clean. Bring the children if you must. I can be patient with repayment when a woman is properly grateful." The silence after that was ugly. Martha's face went white, then red. Clay crossed the floor and opened the door. "Get out." Carter's eyes cooled. "You threatening me?" "No, giving you direction." For a moment, Clay thought the man might force it. Part of him wanted that, the old part, the part that understood anger better than helplessness. But Carter only folded his paper. People in debt should choose their friends carefully. Clay looked at Mara. She was standing rigid, hands curled in her apron, eyes fixed on some point beyond them all. Carter left. Rain tapped the roof. A drop slid through a crack and hit the floor between Clay and Martha. Mrs. Calder muttered something unfit for church and went for a bucket. Tommy came out from behind the chair. Martha turned at once, all her fear swallowed for him. "I'm here. Are we going to jail?" "No." She knelt and took his face in both hands. "No, sweetheart," he said. "Debts grow, not teeth." Her voice shook once, then steadied. "They do not grow teeth." Tommy leaned into her. Clay looked away because the sight was too private, and because he had never hated a man more calmly than he hated Elias Carter in that moment. That night, Clay did not sleep. He lay in the livery loft with rain ticking on the roof and thought about the name on Martha's letter. Pritchard land claim. Carter had papers. Martha had a sealed letter. Debts transferred. A dead husband. A woman hiding in a broken wash house, while a storekeeper circled like a buzzard. At first light, he walked to the county office near the courthouse, a 2-room adobe building where records slept under dust and mice. The clerk, Amos Finch, was a narrow man with ink on his fingers and suspicion in his eyes. Records cost a fee. Clay set a dime on the counter. Pritchard? Which Pritchard? I don't know. Finch looked annoyed, which appeared to be his natural condition. He pulled a ledger and turned pages. Abel Pritchard filed a homestead claim northeast of town. Spring 78, 160 acres. Improvements noted. Cabin, well, 8 acres broken. Clay leaned forward. Current status? Contested? By who? Finch wet his finger and turned another page. Elias Carter, creditor. Claim of unpaid supply account and lien against improvements. Can he take a homestead for store credit? Finch sniffed. Not cleanly, but if the claimant abandoned, died without proper filing, failed proof or widow, lacks documentation. Courts can get muddy. Widow's name. Finch traced the line. Martha Pritchard. Marriage recorded in Kansas, not here. Child Thomas. Infant Ruth. He frowned. There is note of a final proof appointment missed 3 months ago. Why? Doesn't say. Clay looked at the ledger. What happens now? If widow proofs residence and improvements, she might yet hold it. If she cannot, Carter petitions sale of improvements against debt. Finch closed the book halfway. Folks who miss appointments usually lack either papers or courage. Clay kept his temper behind his teeth. What papers? Marriage certificate, husband's claim receipt, proof of death, witnesses to residence, receipts of improvements, if any. Finch studied him. You planning to become a lawyer? Cassidy. No. Good. You'd be a grim one. Clay left with the shape of the truth, but not its heart. For 2 days he said nothing. Martha worked. Tommy swept. Ruth laughed once more, then developed a fever that turned the laughter into a memory. It started with flushed cheeks. By evening her little hands were hot, her breathing quick and shallow. Martha held her by the stove, rocking, lips moving in silent counting between breaths. Clay fetched Doc Brenner without being asked. Martha did not refuse him when he returned with the doctor. That frightened Clay more than anything. Doc Brenner was old, bearded, and blunt as a fence post. He examined Ruth while Martha stood with one hand pressed to her own ribs, as if holding herself together. Lungs are irritated, he said. Fever's high. She needs warmth, milk if she'll take it, broth if she want, and no damp room. Martha closed her eyes. Doc looked at her too long. You coughing blood? No, don't lie to men who know the color of lies. Martha opened her eyes. Streaks sometimes. Clay felt the floor shift under him. Doc grunted. You need rest too. Martha almost laughed. It was a broken sound. I will tell the laundry. Mrs. Carter put both hands on her hips. The laundry can go to perdition. Doc mixed powders, left instructions, and took no money when Martha opened her purse. Cassidy paid. Mara turned on Clay as soon as the doctor left. You had no right. Clay accepted that. No, I said no debt. The debt is mine. For my child? For calling him? She was trembling now, with exhaustion more than anger. Ruth whimpered against her shoulder. I cannot keep accepting what I can't repay. Clay's voice was low. Then don't accept it. Be angry and use it anyway. Martha looked at him, and for one naked second, there was no pride left in her face, only terror. If I start taking help, she whispered, I don't know where it stops. Clay understood then. Not all of it, but enough. Maybe it stops before you break. Her mouth trembled. She turned away. Ruth could not go back to the wash house. Even Martha knew it. Mrs. Calder made up the small storeroom behind the kitchen, the one with a narrow bed and shelves that smelled of dried apples. Clay carried in a washstand, a lamp, and a cradle he borrowed from the pastor's wife. Martha sat beside the stove for the night with Ruth against her chest, while Tommy slept curled on a rug, one hand holding the baby's drop sock. Clay remained in the outer room, mending harness by lamplight, though no work needed doing. Once, near midnight, Marta came out to heat water. She looked smaller without her daytime armor. Her hair hung loose down her back. The lamplight showed the fine hollows at her temples and the redness of her hands. "Mr. Cassidy," she said. "Clay." The name sat between them. After a long moment, she said, "Clay." He looked up. Her eyes were wet, but no tear fell. "I had land." He set down the harness. She stood by the stove, holding the kettle handle with a rag. Abel filed it before Ruth came. He was not a steady man, but land made him almost so. For a while, we had a cabin and a well. Tommy planted beans. Abel built a shelf crooked and called it furniture. A faint breath of a smile touched her mouth and vanished. Then he took work hauling freight to pay Carter. Fever caught him on the road. By the time word came, Carter had already added interest to a debt Abel swore was half paid. Clay listened. Marta swallowed. "I missed the proof appointment because Ruth was born early. I had no horse, no money for a wagon. Tommy had fever too. Carter came after and told me the claim was lost. He said if I stayed on it, the sheriff would put us out and take what was left for debt." "Did he show papers?" "He showed enough paper to scare a woman with a newborn." Clay's jaw tightened. Marta looked down at the kettle. "There's a letter Abel left in a flour tin. Claim receipt, some store account pages. I keep them with me because I don't trust walls. Where are they now?" Her hand went to the cloth purse at her waist. "Safe." Clay nodded. She waited for him to say Carter was lying, that everything would mend easily, that a man with strong shoulders could shoulder law, grief, hunger, and winter. He did not. Instead he said, "We'll read them in daylight." She looked at him then. It had slipped out, but he did not take it back. Ruth whimpered in the other room. Marta lifted the kettle. At the doorway she paused. Abel was not all bad. Clay heard what she was really asking. "Do not make me foolish for having loved him." "I didn't think he was." She nodded once and went back to her baby. In the morning, Ruth's fever broke, not all at once. It eased like a fist opening. Her breathing slowed. She took milk from a spoon, then broth, then slept with her mouth soft and damp curls on her forehead. Tommy sat beside the cradle watching her, as if she might float away if unguarded. "She's staying?" he asked Clay. Clay crouched beside him. "Looks that way." Tommy nodded, then leaned against Clay's shoulder without seeming to know he had done it. Clay went still. The boy smelled of smoke, soap, and child sweat. His weight was slight. Trust, Clay thought, could be heavier than any saddle. Marta saw from the doorway. Clay expected her to pull Tommy back. She did not. She only stood with one hand on the frame, looking at them with an expression that hurt to witness. Later that day she brought out the papers. They sat at Mrs. Carter's kitchen table after supper. The dishes were washed, the stove banked, and the children asleep in the storeroom. Mrs. Carter darned socks in the rocker, pretending not to listen and hearing every word. Marta unfolded the letter first. It was from Abel Pritchard, written in a rough, uneven hand from a freight camp near Jornada del Muerto. Marta read it aloud, voice barely above the stove tick. "Marthy, if Carter says I owe more than $42, he lies. I paid him with 2 hides, 1 mule harness, and cash from McBride's freight dock. Receipts are in the flour tin under the beans. Do not let him put you off the claim. That ground is yours if anything happens to me. I was not the husband I aimed to be, but I did aim, at least that's straight. Tell Tommy the beans will grow if he keeps them watered. Kiss the baby when she comes." Abel. Marta folded the letter carefully. Her fingers rested on the crease. Clay looked at the receipts. Carter's amounts did not match. Some were marked, paid in Abel's rough initials, and Carter's cleaner hand. Others had interest added twice. One sheet had a brand drawn in the corner, a crooked P inside a half circle. The mark Abel had used on 2 cows, listed as payment. "Where are the cows?" Clay asked. Marta shook her head. "Gone when I came back from burying him." Mrs. Calder's needles stopped clicking. Carter sold 2 brindle cows last spring. To who? Clay asked. Rancher south of Masil. Name might be Harlan Voss. Clay stood. Marta looked up. Now, morning, I'm coming. He opened his mouth to refuse, saw her face, and shut it again. Mrs. Calder smiled into her sock. At dawn, Marta wore a faded blue dress and Clay's canvas coat, because Mrs. Calder had insisted the morning wind was indecent. Ruth stayed with Mrs. Calder, and Tommy came along because he had herd cows and refused to leave the fate of beans, land, or justice entirely to adults. They rode in Clay's wagon, wheels bumping over the rutted road, the Oregon mountains, sharp purple against a pale sky. Marta sat straight, hands folded, the cloth purse in her lap. Tommy sat between them, holding the blue tin cup for reasons known only to himself. After a mile he asked, Mr. Clay, ice. We get the cows back. Can Ruth have milk every day? Marta closed her eyes. Clay answered carefully, If they're your cows, I reckon she can. Can a cow remember a boy? Some can. Tommy rubbed the cup rim. I remember them. Daisy had a white tail. Juniper stepped on Pa's foot. Marta's mouth trembled into a small smile. He hollered loud enough to scare the beans. Clay glanced at her. The smile changed her whole face. At Harlan Voss's place, they found the cows. One brindle with a white tail, one darker, heavy with calf. Both bore an altered brand, burned over poorly. Clay saw the half circle beneath the newer mark. Voss was a sunburned man with honest confusion and bad tobacco. Bought him from Carter Fair? Got a bill? Clay asked. Voss fetched it. Marta stood at the fence, one hand covering her mouth. Tommy gripped the rails. Daisy, he whispered. The brindle cow lifted her head. Tommy made a soft clicking sound with his tongue. The cow stepped toward him. No court in the territory could have made stronger testimony. Voss looked from the boy to the cow and spat into the dust. Well, I'll be cursed. Clay showed Abel's receipt. Voss showed Carter's bill. The dates overlapped ugly. I.e., in losing money for Carter's sin, Voss said. Marta's shoulders tightened. Clay looked at the cows, then at Tommy's small fingers through the rails. He had savings in a coffee tin under his bunk. Money meant for my be buying a small place someday, or my be bay for burying himself decently when the time came. He had held it because holding money was easier than wanting anything. How much? Clay asked. Marta turned. No, he did not look at her yet. How much, Voss? Voss named a price that was fair enough to sting. Clay nodded. I'll pay it. You signed that you bought from Carter and sold to me after seeing prior claim. Clay, Marta said. He looked at her then. Temporary. I cannot repay that. Didn't ask you to. That makes it worse. Tommy looked between them, frightened. Clay lowered his voice. Those cows are proof. If Carter stole them, the land matter changes. If we leave them, proof can disappear again. Mara's anger faltered because he had not said charity. He had said strategy. Respect sometimes wore a plain coat. She looked at Daisy, then at Tommy, then at the purse in her hand. I will sign a note, she said. No interest. I will sign a note. Clay held her gaze. All right, so she did. On a scrap of Voss's paper, Marta Pritchard wrote that she owed Clay Cassidy the purchase price of 2 cows wrongfully sold, to be repaid from recovered property if the claim was restored. Her hand did not shake. Clay put the paper in his pocket like it mattered. To her, it did. They brought the cows back slow. Tommy rode in the wagon, turned around on his knees, watching Daisy and Juniper trail behind. Once Daisy lowed, and the boy laughed so suddenly, Clay almost forgot how to breathe. But word traveled faster than a wagon. By the time they reached town, Elias Carter stood in front of the Mercantile with Sheriff Bledsoe beside him, and half the street pretending not to stare. Carter's face was smooth as oiled wood. Cassidy, you are in possession of stolen livestock. Clay stopped the wagon. Martha went very still. Tommy's laughter died. Sheriff Bledsoe was not a bad man, only one tired of disputes with more paper than bullets. Clay, I need to ask about those cows. Martha stepped down before Clay could speak. Dust lifted around the hem of her blue dress. She held Abel's receipts in one hand and Voss's side bill in the other. They are mine, she said. Carter smiled. Mrs. Pritchard is confused. Grief and hardship can disturb a woman's recollection. Clay climbed down. Martha lifted her chin. Do not call me confused, because you counted on me being hungry. The street quieted. Even the horses seemed to listen. Carter's smile tightened. Careful. No, Martha said. I have been careful. I have folded every coin. I have watered milk for my babies so my son would not see there was none. I have scrubbed shirts for men who would not meet my eye and listened while women wondered what sin put me in a washhouse. I have been so careful I nearly let you steal the last thing my husband managed to do right. Tommy slipped from the wagon and came to her side. He was shaking, but he stood there. Sheriff Bledsoe took the papers. Let's see. Carter's eyes flicked toward Clay. This is your doing. Clay's voice was calm. No, this is hers. The sheriff read slowly. People shifted closer. Mrs. Calder had come out of the livery, flower on her sleeve and Ruth in her arms. Doc Brenner stood near the trough. Amos Finch, the clerk, hurried from the county office with ink still on his fingers. Martha looked once at Clay. He gave the smallest nod. She reached into her purse and drew out Abel's letter. My husband wrote this before he died, she said. It names the debt and the receipts. It names the claim. Mr. Finch has the record. Mr. Carter told me it was lost because he knew I had no wagon, no money, and a sick newborn when the proof appointment came. Finch cleared his throat. The record shows contested, not forfeited. Carter turned on him. You said abandonment was possible. Possible is not proven, Finch said, enjoying himself for the first time in Clay's memory. Sheriff Bledsoe looked at the receipts again. Carter, this paid mark yours? Carter said nothing. The sheriff's face hardened. A murmur moved through the street. Then Carter did the thing cowards do when paper fails. He reached for Martha's arm, not hard enough to bruise before witnesses, but hard enough to remind her of other rooms, other threats, other times a man had assumed fear would make her obedient. Clay moved. He caught Carter's wrist and removed it from Martha as if taking a snake off a porch. Don't, Clay said. One word, low, final. Carter's face reddened. You'll regret laying hands on me. I regret not. Sheriff Bledsoe stepped between them. That's enough. Ruth began to cry from Mrs. Calder's arms, startled by the tension. The sound broke something open in the watching crowd. Not a loud cry, but thin and furious and alive. Tommy turned toward his sister. She's hungry, he said. It was such a simple sentence, such an ordinary child's need. Yet it cut through all the paper, pride, gossip, and law. A baby was hungry because a man had stolen cows and frightened a mother off her land. A boy had crossed town each morning because adults had chosen not to see him. Mrs. Calder brought Ruth to Martha. Martha took her baby, and the child rooted against her shoulder. Clay looked at Sheriff Bledsoe. Those cows give milk. The sheriff folded the papers. Carter, you'll come with me? Carter laughed once. On whose charge? Fraud to start? My bay theft? My bay intimidation of a widow. I expect the judge can find more if I give him an afternoon. The street breathed out. Carter's eyes found Martha. You think this makes you safe? Clay stepped nearer, but Martha raised her hand, stopping him. She faced Carter with Ruth in her arms and Tommy at her skirt. No doubt, it makes me believed. Safe comes after. Clay would remember that line for the rest of his life. The weeks that followed were not easy, because justice on the frontier did not ride fast unless someone paid for a good horse. There were hearings, records, signatures, witnesses. Voss came in and swore about the altered brands. Finch found the missed appointment notice had never been delivered. Mrs. Calder testified that Martha worked for pay, not charity, and added that any court unable to tell the difference should be swept out and relayed. Carter's accounts began to unravel. Not only Martha's, others too. A Mexican widow from the South Road, a German blacksmith, 2 Apache scouts paid in vouchers Carter had discounted near to nothing. Once one thread pulled, the whole crooked cloth showed. Martha did not become suddenly carefree. Hunger leaves habits. She still cut bread evenly. She still saved bacon grease in a tin. She still woke if Ruth coughed. But she began to look toward the horizon instead of only the next hour. The court restored her right to prove the Pritchard claim. That meant she had to go back. Clay drove her, the children, the cows, 1 borrowed plow, 3 sacks of flour, a crate of hens from Mrs. Calder, and the trunk that had followed Martha through every humiliation. The claim lay 12 miles northeast, where the land rose gently toward Mesquite Flats, and the mountains watched from a distance. The cabin was worse than Clay expected. 1 shutter hung loose. The porch had sagged at 1 corner. Weeds swallowed the little garden. The well rope was frayed. Inside, dust lay thick over a crooked shelf, a broken chair, a coal stove, and the remains of a child's bean patch visible through the window, dry stalks rattling in the wind. Martha stood in the doorway with Ruth on her hip. Tommy ran to the garden, stopped, and stared at the dead beans. His shoulders sank. Martha closed her eyes. Clay wanted to say they could fix it. He wanted to promise green things by spring and warmth by nightfall. But promises were cheap until nailed, hauled, planted, and paid for. So he took off his coat, lifted the broken porch beam, and said, "Tommy, fetch me that flat stone." The boy turned. "That one?" Tommy pointed. "That'll do." Martha watched as her son carried the stone with both hands, face serious again, but not hopeless. By sunset, the porch stood braced. The stove drew smoke. The floor was swept. Mrs. Calder's hens complained from a makeshift coop. Daisy and Juniper cropped winter-dry grass near the rail fence. Clay had patched enough to hold them for the night. Martha made supper from potatoes, salt pork, and onions in an iron skillet that had been left behind. The smell filled the cabin in a way that made it stop being abandoned. Ruth sat on a quilt, banging the blue tin cup with a spoon. Tom rearranged 3 beans he had found in the dirt on the table beside his plate like treasures. Clay washed at the well and came in only when Martha called him. There were 4 places set. He looked at the table. Martha pretended not to see his hesitation. "You worked." He sat. No meal in his life had tasted better. The potatoes were half burned at the edges. The coffee was strong enough to float a nail. The bread was store-bought and going stale. Still, Tommy ate slowly this time, glancing at the stove, the door, his mother, Clay, and the room that was becoming theirs again. After supper, Myra washed dishes in a basin while Clay dried. Their shoulders nearly touched in the small space. "You don't have to stay," she said. "I know. The livery needs you. It can do without me a day." "A day." He set a plate on the shelf. "My bee too." She turned the cup in the water. "Clay." He looked at her. Her voice was quiet. "I'm not looking for a man to rescue me. I know. I need you to know it plain. I do." The water trembled around her hands. "Then why do you keep coming?" There it was, the question with no safe answer. Clay took the towel and dried the blue cup carefully. "Ate at first?" "Because they were hungry. And now?" He looked toward the quilt where Ruth had fallen asleep sitting up, forehead tipped against Tommy's arm. Tommy, not daring to move, sat stiff as a fence post to keep her comfortable. "Now," Clay said, "because when I leave, I keep listening for this place." Martha's fingers stilled. That was all he said. It was less than love and more dangerous. That night, Clay slept in the barn loft with an old saddle blanket and the sound of cows breathing below. He dreamed of his sister Eliza, not sick in bed as he often did, but standing in Mara's kitchen, washing a cup and laughing at him for being afraid of living. In the morning, he woke before dawn and found Marta already outside, wrapped in a shawl, feeding the stove with splinters. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." They stood in the gray cold while the eastern sky paled. A rooster, offended by the hour, crowed from the crate. Mara held her shawl closed. Who was she? Clay did not ask who. Some questions arrived with their own lantern. "My sister, Eliza." Marta waited. "She died while I was gone." "Childbirth? Baby too?" He looked toward the mountains. "I had taken a cattle job because the money was good. She asked me not to, said she had a bad feeling. I told her feelings didn't buy flour." Marta's face softened with pain. Clay picked up a piece of kindling and broke it in half. "When I came back, there were 2 graves. I've been mad at work ever since. At work, anything that kept me from being there. At anything that needed doing more than a person needed me." Marta looked down. "Need can be a hard thing to forgive." He nodded. She drew a slow breath. "When Abel died, I was angry at him for leaving me. Then angry at myself because he hadn't chosen fever. Then angry at him again for debts. Then sorry for being angry. It wore me out." Clay looked at her. She gave a small, sad smile. "Grief is poor company but persistent." The sun touched the rim of the world. Clay said, "I couldn't save her." No, the words struck clean, but not cruel. Then Marta added, "But you brought milk." His throat tightened. Inside the cabin, Ruth woke and began to fuss. Tommy murmured, "I got her, Ma," in a voice thick with sleep. Marta turned toward the sound, but not before Clay saw tears on her cheeks. For nearly a month, Clay came and went between the livery and the claim. He never arrived empty-handed, but he learned what Marta could accept. Nails were acceptable because the porch needed them. Seed because the garden would repay it. Coffee because he drank half. Cloth because Mrs. Calder had extra, though Marta was not fooled and made 2 shirts for the livery boys in trade. Marta changed the cabin by inches. She washed the windows with vinegar until light came through. She sewed curtains from flour sacks and embroidered tiny blue flowers along the hem with thread pulled from an old dress. She set the crooked shelf straight and lined it with jars. She planted beans with Tommy in rows so careful they looked like writing. She scrubbed the table until the old knife marks showed like a map. Clay repaired the well sweep, reset fence posts, patched the roof, and built a small cradle rocker from scrap pine. Tommy followed him everywhere, asking questions until Clay pretended to charge a penny apiece, and Tommy paid with pebbles. "Why do nails bend?" "Hit wrong." "Why do men bend?" Clay paused. "Same." Tommy thought on that a long while. Ruth grew rounder. Not fat, not yet, but less bird-like. Her cheeks pinked. She learned to say da at Daisy, the cow, bull at Red, and K at Clay, which made Tommy declare her ignorant of proper names but clever for a baby. The town noticed. Some women who had whispered began sending small things to Mrs. Calder for the Pritchard children, while insisting their names not be mentioned. Mrs. Calder mentioned them anyway, loudly. Pastor Bell brought a Bible with a cracked cover and left it on Matea's table, saying every house needed one book that had survived worse weather than the roof. Doc Brenner came once a week and pretended he was passing through while checking Ruth's lungs. But outside pressure did not vanish just because goodness had found its boots. Carter made bail. He returned to town thinner, angrier, and stripped of some power, but not all. A cornered man with money could still poison a well with talk. He began saying Clay had designs on Marta's land, that the widow had trapped him, that the children had been used to draw pity, that no decent woman would let an unmarried man spend hours at her claim. Clay ignored it until ignoring it began to cost Marta. One Saturday, she came to town with eggs to sell and left Carter's mercantile with the basket still full. At the bakery, Mrs. Voss bought 2 dozen, but would not meet her eyes. Outside the church, 3 women stopped talking when Martha approached. Tommy heard enough to ask, on the wagon ride home, "Ma, what's ruined mean?" Martha's hands tightened on the reins. Clay, who had come along to pick up hinges, looked straight ahead. "It means something got damaged," Martha said carefully. "Are we? No. Ice, Mr. Clay." Her mouth trembled. "No," Tommy frowned. "Ton wide, Mrs. Baker say it." Clay felt the question like a spur. Martha said, "Because grown folks sometimes use words too big for their kindness." Tommy accepted this with suspicion. At the claim, Martha unloaded the unsold eggs in silence. Clay carried in the flour. She turned on him before he could set it down. "You should stop coming." He put the sack on the table. "No," he said. Her eyes flashed. "You don't know what I'm asking." "I do. You think this is stubborn pride." "It isn't. Carter is using your name against you." "I've had worse men use worse against me," she said, and the force of it stopped him. "Against my children, against the claim, against the proof. They will say I invited impropriety. They will say I took food in a man and land all by the same method." Clay was silent. Martha's voice broke, and she hated that it did. "I fought too hard to have Tommy hear his mother called that." He looked toward the yard where Tommy was showing Ruth a chicken feather. Martha wiped at her cheek angrily. "So you need to go." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Clay could have argued, could have sworn he did not care, could have told her he loved her then and there, but that would have made his heart another weight for her to carry. So he did the harder thing. He picked up his hat. At the door he stopped. "I won't come to the claim unless you ask." Her face crumpled for half a breath before she mastered it. "Thank you, but I'm not leaving you alone in town." She looked up. He met her eyes. "You can be done with me in private if that's what you need. In public, I stand where I stand." Clay, no grand speech. Martha, just that. He left. For 6 days, he did not go to the claim. Those days were long. At the livery, every sound of wheels made him look up. At night, the loft felt larger and emptier than before. He worked until his hands ached. He mended harness already mended. He rebuilt a gate Mrs. Carter said had another year in it. He drank coffee gone bitter because no one had laughed softly at the face he made over it. On the 7th morning, Tommy came, not hungry this time, running. Clay saw from the yard and dropped the bridle in his hand. The boy's face was white. He had no coat. One shoe was unlaced. "Mr. Clay." Clay was already moving. "What happened?" Ma fell. The world narrowed. Clay caught the boy by the shoulders. "Where?" "By the well." She got up, but she's bleeding on her hand, and she won't sit, and Carter's men are there. Carter's men. Tommy nodded hard, breath sobbing. "They said the fence line's wrong. They're taking posts. Ma told me get the sheriff, but I got you first." Clay lifted Tommy into the saddle of the nearest horse, swung up behind him, and rode. By the time they reached the claim, 2 men were pulling posts from the north fence. Carter sat on horseback near the road, smiling beneath his hat. Martha stood between them and the garden, with Ruth on her hip and blood running from a cut across her palm. Her face was gray, but her spine was iron. Clay reined in hard enough to throw dust. Carter turned. "This is a boundary matter." Clay dismounted. "This is trespass. I have a survey. You have a lie with measurements." One of Carter's men lifted an assa toward the next post. Clay stepped between him and the fence. "Swing that and choose your doctor." The man hesitated. Martha said, "Clay, don't." He did not look back. "Tommy, take your ma, Ruth." Tommy ran to Martha. She handed him the baby because her bleeding hand had begun to shake. Carter's voice sharpened. "You keep proving my point, Cassidy. Living out here in all but name. defending another man's widow, buying her cattle, threatening lawful agents. The judge will enjoy the pattern. Clay felt anger rise, hot and old. He could break Carter. It would be easy. It would also give the man exactly what he wanted. Then Martha stepped beside Clay, not behind him, beside him. She wrapped her injured hand in her apron and faced Carter. "I sent for the sheriff." Carter smiled. "Good, let him see. He will." They waited in the wind. Clay took a clean handkerchief from his pocket and held it out to Martha. She looked at it, then at him. "Your hand," he said. She let him wrap it. That small surrender felt larger than the whole sky. Sheriff Bledsoe arrived with Amos Finch, Doc Brenner, and Harlan Voss, because Tommy, in his panic, had apparently gathered half the useful men in town by shouting at them. Finch carried a rolled survey map. His expression was pinched with importance. "I checked the original plat," he announced, before anyone asked. "The Pritchard North fence is within claim boundaries. Carter's adjoining parcel begins beyond the wash." Carter's face darkened. "That map is old? So is law," Finch said. Sheriff Bledsoe ordered Carter's men to replace the posts. They did it sullenly. Doc Brenner cleaned Martha's hand in the kitchen while she hissed through her teeth and refused whiskey because Ruth disliked the smell. Clay stood on the porch, shaking with delayed fury. When Carter rode past him, he leaned down. "This isn't finished." Clay looked up. "It is with you." But it was not. The final hearing came 2 weeks later. Carter had petitioned to challenge Martha's proof on grounds of reputation, abandonment, and improper influence by Clay. It was desperate, but desperate lies can still wound. The courthouse filled beyond comfort. Martha wore her blue dress, mended at the cuff. Tommy sat beside Mrs. Calder, hair slicked down with water and one cowlick defying all civilization. Ruth slept in Doc Brenner's arms because he claimed medical authority over babies who drooled on his vest. Clay sat behind Martha, not beside her. He had chosen the distance carefully. The judge was a heavy man with tired eyes who had ridden circuit long enough to distrust anyone too polished. Carter spoke first. He painted Martha as unreliable, Clay as opportunistic, the children as props, Abel as a debtor, and the land as practically abandoned. Martha listened without flinching, but Clay saw her fingers twist in her lap. Then she stood. She did not speak like a lawyer. She spoke like a woman who had counted flour in spoonfuls and still kept receipts dry. She gave the dates: Abel's filing, Ruth's birth, Abel's death, the fever, the missed notice, Carter's threats, the altered accounts, the cows, the restored fence, her work, her witnesses, her intention to live on the land and prove it with every board, bean row, and bucket drawn from the well. Carter's lawyer rose, and Mr. Cassidy's roll. Martha turned slightly, enough to see Clay. Then she faced the judge. "Mr. Cassidy fed my children when I could not. He followed them because a little boy should not have to carry a baby across town before dawn to keep her alive. He bought back evidence when a thief had sold it. He repaired what was broken because broken things need repair. If that is improper influence, then hunger itself is the witness against me." The room was silent. The lawyer pressed. "Yes, Mr. Cassidy courting you." Clay's heart struck once, hard. Martha's face colored, but she did not look down. "No." The word landed clean. Clay accepted it because he had to. Then Martha added, "He has not asked because he understood I needed my name cleared before I could decide what to do with my heart." Clay stopped breathing. Mrs. Calder made a small sound that might have been a cough or victory. The lawyer, irritated, said, "So there is affection." Martha's eyes flashed. "There is respect. You might not recognize it from Mr. Carter's account books." A laugh moved through the room before the judge struck his gavel, though his mouth twitched. Then the judge called Clay. Clay stood. He did not like public speaking. His hands knew reins, rope, leather, wood, not speeches. He took the oath and faced the room. The lawyer asked, "Did you give Mrs. Pritchard food?" "Yes." "Money?" "Yes." "Livestock?" "No." "I bought her stolen cows as evidence and hold a note she insisted on signing." "Did you spend nights at her claim?" "In the barn, when repairs or safety required." "Did you benefit from presenting yourself as her protector?" Clay looked at Martha. She sat very still. He turned back. "No, then. Why involve yourself so deeply?" There it was again, the question. This time, plain truth had nowhere left to hide. Clay removed his hat. "Because 10 years ago my sister needed me, and I wasn't there. That failure has sat at my table every day since. When Tommy Pritchard came hungry with Ruth in his arms, I knew what it was to arrive too late. I chose not to." No one moved. He continued, voice rougher. "Martha Pritchard owes me nothing. Not gratitude, not land, not her name, not her hand. If this court thinks my help stains her, put the stain on me. Leave her claim clean." Martha bowed her head. Clay sat down before his voice could betray more. The judge gave his ruling before dusk. Martha Pritchard's claim stood. Carter's challenge was dismissed. Fraud charges would proceed separately. The court recognized her right to complete final proof and retain all improvements. The 2 cows were to be returned to her ownership clear of lien. Carter was ordered to pay costs. For a moment after the words were spoken, Martha did not move. Then Tommy whispered, "Ma, does that mean Daisy's ours?" The whole crew waited. Martha turned and took his face in her hands. "Yes." Tommy's eyes filled. He tried to be brave and failed. Martha pulled him close, and Ruth woke in Doc Brenner's arms and began clapping at nothing, which settled the matter better than any gavel. Outside, the late sun washed the street gold. People came to Martha awkwardly. Some apologized outright. Some bought eggs they did not need. Mrs. Baker cried and claimed dust. Finch shook Martha's hand as if she were a county official. Sheriff Bledsoe tipped his hat. Voss promised to help brand the spring calf correctly when it came. Clay stood by the hitching rail, apart. Martha found him there. For a moment, neither spoke. Wagons rolled behind them. Somewhere a church bell rang the hour. Tommy was showing Ruth the courthouse steps, teaching her to climb them on all fours, while Mrs. Calder supervised with theatrical alarm. Martha held out a folded paper. Clay looked at it. "What's that?" "The note." He took it slowly. "I still owe you," she said. "The court restored the cows. You paid Voss, and Carter pays costs. That might take years." Clay almost smiled. "Likely." She looked down the street. "I don't want my first free act to be unpaid debt." He unfolded the note. Her handwriting looked just as careful as it had the first day. Then he tore it in half. Martha's eyes widened. Before she could protest, he handed the pieces back. "Then don't let it be debt. What should it be?" He looked at Tommy, at Ruth, at the dust, at the woman standing before him with freedom still new in her hands. "A beginning," he said. Her eyes filled slowly. "Clay Cassidy," she whispered, "that is a dangerous thing to offer a woman who has just found her ground. I have children. I know. I have a claim that needs more work than one man can imagine. I can imagine a fair amount." Her mouth trembled toward a smile. "I am stubborn. Yes, I am afraid more often than I look. So am I." That surprised her. He stepped closer, leaving enough space for refusal. "I won't ask for what you can't give. I won't hurry what needs time, but I am asking permission to come Sunday after church and fix that east gate. My bay stay for supper if Tommy hasn't charged too many pebbles for questions." Martha laughed then, softly, with tears on her face. It was the first unguarded laugh he had heard from her. "Just," she said, "Sunday, that was all." but it was enough to carry a man through winter. Spring came green in small pieces. Beans broke the soil in Tommy's rows. Juniper calved a red heifer with a white star, and Ruth learned to say milk with great authority. The porch Clay had braced became a place where Martha shelled peas, Tommy carved whistles badly, and Ruth napped in a basket with one foot always escaping the blanket. Clay still worked at the livery, but Sundays became his, then Wednesday evenings. Then any morning the fence needed mending, which seemed often because fences, like lonely men, find reasons to need attention. He courted Ma with hinges, coffee, and patience. He brought a packet of flower seeds once, embarrassed by their uselessness. Martha planted them beneath the window. When the first marigold opened, she cut it and placed it in a chipped cup on the table where all could see it. He gave Tommy a real wooden horse for his 7th birthday, carved by his own hand, with a crooked mane and sturdy legs. Tommy named it Biscuit because hungry horses remember. Clay had to step outside for a while after that. For Ruth, he built a little chair. She used it mostly to climb on to things she should not. Martha gave Clay a new shirt at harvest, blue cotton, the seams strong and fine. Payment, she said. For what? For staying useful. He wore it to church the next Sunday. Mrs. Calder declared it improved him by 15%. In late summer, after final proof was accepted, and the Pritchard claim became no longer a contested hope but a recorded truth, Clay came to supper and found the table set with fried chicken, beans, warm bread, butter from Daisy's cream, and a peach pie cooling near the window. Mara wore the blue dress. Her hair was pinned back with a ribbon Ruth had tried to eat twice. Tommy met Clay at the gate with unnatural solemnity. You got to wash good? I usually do. Better than usually. Clay looked toward the house. Martha was standing in the doorway, pretending not to watch. He washed at the basin until Tommy approved. After supper, when the children were full and drowsy, Martha sent Tommy to fetch something from the shelf. He returned carrying the blue tin cup. Clay looked at it and felt the whole year move through him. The livery yard at dawn, a boy's fear, a baby's hungry mouth, a woman in a washhouse doorway with pride as her last blanket. Martha set the cup between them. I kept it, she said. I see. I hated it for a while. Clay nodded. Then I understood it was not proof of shame. She touched the worn rim. It was proof Tommy knew where mercy was. Clay could not speak. Tommy leaned against Martha's chair, eyes sleepy but determined. Ma said I can ask now? Clay looked at Martha. She did not look away. Tommy said, Mr. Clay, if you married Ma, would you still fix gates? Martha closed her eyes in mortification. Tommy, what? Gates break? Ruth banged her spoon. Gate? Clay looked at the children, then at Martha. Her face was red, but she was smiling through it, afraid and brave and beautiful in the lamplight. He pushed back his chair and knelt beside her. I had a better speech, he said. I doubt that. He laughed under his breath, then took her work-roughened hand. Martha Pritchard, I love the way you make a home tell the truth. I love your courage when fear is standing right beside you. I love your children. I love that you pay what you owe and give more than you count. I would be honored to fix your gate, drink your coffee, help raise Tommy and Ruth, and stand beside you under your own roof for as many years as God allows. Tears slipped down her cheeks. He swallowed. Will you marry me? She looked at their joined hands. Then she looked at the blue cup, at Tommy holding his breath, at Ruth with bread crumbs on her chin, at the clean curtains moving in the evening air. Yes, she said. Tommy exhaled as if he had moved a piano. Ruth clapped because everyone else seemed pleased. Clay bowed his head over Martha's hand, and for the first time in 10 years, the empty place inside him did not feel like punishment. It felt like a room waiting to be filled. They married in September beneath the cottonwood near the cabin, because Martha said the land had witnessed the worst and deserved to witness joy. Mrs. Calder stood beside her with Ruth on one hip and cried openly while denying every tear. Tommy wore shoes that pinched and carried the rings in the blue tin cup, polished bright. Clay wore the shirt Martha had sewn. The town came. Not all, but enough. Some brought pies, some brought apologies with awkward hands. Doc Brenner gave them a milk cowbell and said every marriage needed something loud enough to find what wandered. Sheriff Bledsoe nailed a proper gate latch on the east fence before leaving, which Martha said was the finest wedding gift a practical woman could receive. Carter did not come. By then he was awaiting trial in another county where his accounts had followed him like wolves. At sunset, after the vows, after the meal, after Tommy spilled lemonade and Ruth fell asleep with icing on her sleeve, Clay stood on the porch beside Martha and watched lanterns glow in the yard. The repaired fence held. The curtains moved softly in the window. On the table inside, coffee waited under a cloth, and the last slices of peach pie sat between 4 plates. Martha leaned her shoulder against his arm. "Listen," she said. "Clay, listen. Children breathing, hens settling, wind in cottonwood leaves, Daisy lowing near the barn, Mrs. Calder laughing at something Pastor Bell had said, the stove ticking as it cooled, a house alive with small sounds." "What am I listening for?" he asked. Martha looked up at him. "Nothing hungry." Clay closed his eyes. "Some truths come to a man like thunder. Others come like bread placed quietly on a table." Clay Cassidy had followed a hungry boy and a sick baby one cold morning, thinking he might find a need he could answer with milk and biscuits. Instead, he found Mara Pritchard, a woman holding her dignity together with raw hands, and 2 children brave enough to walk toward kindness before dawn. And in the end, the truth he found was not only who had wronged them, but what love could make right when it arrived humbly, stayed steadily, and left no one hungry at the door.